those of you who don't know me, I'm Louis Bass, the founder and CEO of the Delta. And yeah, the Delta is actually one of the biggest venture builders in the world, with a team of over 300 venture building experts globally. And for those of you who don't know us, our mission is to accelerate the rate of solving the world's biggest challenges. And we achieve this by building capabilities that deliver as many unfair advantages as we can to ventures to do, number one, eliminate failures, and number two, to drive ventures to scale into market dominators with large impact. In under 7 years, we've surpassed some of the key metrics of almost all other venture builders and incubators globally. And as of today, we have an incubation to unicorn success rate of around 5%, with a few extra surprises set for the next 6 months. So kind of watch this space. But yeah, enough about the Delta. Today, we have 3 amazing entrepreneurs and good friends. And we're here to learn a little bit more about their journey through scaling. How they went about it, and hopefully to learn a bit about what founders can expect before they get there. I think there's something saying I'm breaking up a lot. Am I breaking up a lot?
I can hear you fairly clearly, Louis, but I know you sometimes, I understand you better because you have that connection.
Is it just because I make no sense when I talk and you expect that?
No, okay. We can hear you.
All right, cool. All right. Yeah, so I mean, I think the main thing here is about basically giving people a little bit of a different insight into what it's like to scale, right? I think a lot of people a lot of the basic stuff you can look up online, but some of the stuff you can't know until you've been there or you hear some of these stories, right? So tonight is about getting a bit of a sneak peek into what it's like to actually scale. But before I actually get us going on the first question, I think it's best for us to get a quick kind of 1 or 2 minute, only 2 minute, please. I've been on many calls with all 3 of these guys and have given like at least a half an hour intro. So let's do the 2 minute intro each, please. Do you want to kick off, Marvin?
Yeah, go. So Marvin Lebega, African entrepreneur, similar to Louis yourself, very keen on solving African problems with technology. And I think ultimately solving those to become global problems. And I think that's been our key focus in building out Go1. Built a few businesses, some with you, Louis. My largest one has been Go1. And so we'll share the learnings from that one there. Also a fairly active VC. Just a way of background to what we do at Go1. So ultimately we help people unlock their positive potential through a love for learning. And we do that through a platform which can be likened to the Spotify for corporate training. So we aggregate learning content to one library and then offer that to organizations across 30 countries. And so in terms of, I guess, scale and growth of where we are, raised about 400 million, have about 5 million odd active users, have clients in about 30 countries, and I guess have raised a valuation north of $2 billion.
Cool, nice. Julian?
Great, my name is Julian. I'm the CEO and founder of WeFox. WeFox, we started 7 years ago in our living room in Switzerland, Zurich. And now it's a company of 1,300 people, 600 million revenues. We've raised around 1.3 billion till date, latest valuation 4.5 billion. So we're now the largest insurtech in the world. And what is it that we do? I think the secret sauce about our growth has been that we actually build technology to empower human insurance agents rather than trying to replace them. So 7 years ago, when insurtech was hot, most people tried to replace human agents, and what we did was empower human agents. And what that does to our model is we can scale much faster, and we have much more substantial financials and profitable growth. And we started off as the ugly duckling 7 years ago. Everyone thought we were the uncool kids on the block, and now we're number one.
Nice. Nice.
I mean, you can be number one and be uncool, Julian, right? So
don't forget that.
Not anymore. Not anymore.
Now he's cool.
Yeah, now you're cool.
Self-proclaimed.
Yeah.
It's okay. Lucas?
Yeah, so hi, my name is Lucas. I'm the CEO and founder of OneFootball. The name says it. We're the global leading football platform. So some Americans call it soccer for whatever reason. So we're referring to the amazing game with 22 players in this ball. And there's the World Cup starting on Sunday. Yeah, we serve more than 100 million users. And our investors include all the big football clubs, including Barcelona, Real Madrid, Liverpool, Arsenal, Chelsea, Juve, PSG, etc. And what we're doing literally is we're building the football ecosystem for and with the football ecosystem and the most important players. And we serve as a partner and not as, the social media companies you know and are aware of. And by doing that, we're joining forces with the leading clubs, leagues, federations and players, and building out this platform and serving with multiple direct-to-consumer revenue streams. And we've just raised a 300 million round earlier this year with great investors backing the business, and super proud of building a platform business out of Europe, which is quite rare and not common because us Europeans were not really familiar how to do that. So I'm super happy to do that because football is European and belongs to Europe and should be not Americanized, if I may say. And I'm super happy to join this call today.
Lovely, thanks.
And by the way, I'm also super cool now, Julian.
Yeah, I have to add that. Cool. So I know we have limited time, so let's get into it, right? So I think scaling in its own right is not always technically the most difficult part, right? I guess depends who you ask. But I think the real kicker in my experience with startups is that everything that it basically happens at exactly the same time, right? And for those of you who experience this, that like pressure that you have to work through is immense, right? And I think that, or I believe that in these mega pressure situations is where the unicorns or the kind of hyperscale companies are really separated from the rest, right? There's a lot of stuff you can do that doesn't get you, but do you get you there? But like, are you willing to go as far as it's required, right? So to get us kicked off, I think the first question, which I think is probably something you're not always going to read on the internet about how to scale, is kind of something along the lines of kind of what was the highest pressure moment in the last 5 years and how did you deal with it? I guess, or rather like what was the highest pressure moment over the last 5 years that you can share with us and kind of how did you deal with it, right? What was the situation? So I don't know if anyone wants to take that one off the bat. Otherwise, we go with Melvin.
Okay, I'll take the hit because I'm a team player. Hopefully I answer and I become cool. That'd be awesome.
All of them are.
Take one for the team.
I'm gonna give them to you every time until you proclaim yourself cool as well. You didn't do that.
It's an interesting one, right? I think I'm a big believer that business is people, right? And I think many of us are in tech, and tech creates the scalability that we achieve, but often it does come down to the humans in your business. And often I find as founders and entrepreneurs, one, like just because you and a few friends come together doesn't mean that you are the best place to build your business to where it needs to go. And I think if I think about our journey, the most crucial time was where, so in our business, there are 5 co-founders. And there was a point in time where we're thinking of scaling our product team. So engineering and product were together at the time. And the big conversation for us was, we knew that our technical co-founder, probably one of the smartest guys I know, Chris, didn't necessarily want to manage a very large team in the business. But it's almost that dynamic where historically all the co-founders are all the guys who are C's and all top of the company. And I think it was the mature conversation around saying, okay, fine, given where we want to go as a business, who needs to be in what seats more importantly? And then 2, saying like, look, do we want to bring in senior people within the team to be able to support us in our growth? And I think for me, that was very crucial in our scale journey, only because we as founders could have been the biggest retardant to our journey just because we felt as though we knew everything. And I think having the humility to say, fine, look, we want to scale a product team or product squad, and let's bring in the right person to do that to support you, I think has been probably the most crucial moment, because I think in those conversations, it can go very left very quickly because as an individual, think yourself as a founder, you feel as though, are you less important than the organization? And I think it's about one, building strong relationships in your teams, even if you aren't founders, but more importantly, being able to have the frank conversation. And so I think for us, that was very crucial in our scaling journey because we could have retired our own growth.
No, I mean, super fair point. I still sometimes kind of see at the end of the day, like some ventures who like at particular early stage still believe they're not going to go through that at one point until the pressure really pushes you to the point where you finally realize that you have to have those conversations, right? It's coming either way. There's like it's astronomical odds that you would get the exact right team to start. Unless, well, it's happened. I guess I've seen it once or twice. Anyone else? Julian, do you want to take that?
Happy to jump in. Yeah, I mean, when we started, I have never been a CEO before. I was the COO at the company before, always taking care of operations, but never taking care of the fundraising part. So we started WeFox, and I was very bad at fundraising. First of all, I didn't have a network, and second of all, the few people I met, just threw me literally out of the office because it was so terrible. I remember this one time where I was like really proud of this one feature in the app that was an SOS button where you could connect in real time live to your customer service agent when you're in trouble. So I was at this VC's office and I was kind of sharing my screen, and I was showing the app, and I was saying, okay, now I connect, and then it just said connection failure. And then I was like, all right, must be your internet, like your internet is not working. And they were like completely bored on their emails, like, no, internet is working fine. And so I sucked. And then like the first round was actually more luck than anything. So I was at this dinner with Mark Benioff, the founder of Salesforce. And I was invited, I think by accident. And then we're sitting at this table, and then we're doing these intros, and I'm like, Mark, I really love Salesforce, but you're going to die just like the dinosaurs if you don't manage to get to the core of disruptive businesses. And I checked your numbers, and 96% of your revenue is made with dinosaurs, right? And in the startup world, you're called an overpriced CRM, and if you don't change, you're going to die. And he looked at me, and I was like, what the fuck? Who invited this guy? Right. And then he was like trying to like argue and say, no, Uber is on Salesforce or whatever. And then like he recognized, okay, like arguing. And then the next question in front of everyone was, are you looking for funding? And I was like, hell yeah. And that's how they did the seed round, right? And the crazy thing was, the seed round was I didn't tell the story before. Like this is like stuff I have never said before. So the seed round was 5 million, but I had already taken loans just to keep the company alive worth 4 million. So basically all that came in was 1.5 million, right? Which obviously didn't last very long, right? So I had to like the day this was signed, I had to like start the next fundraise, right? And that went really, really badly again. And I can tell you the story that I ran to all investors and everyone turned us down. And then there was one single investor left and around 1 week of cash left. And I remember, the morning. So that was actually an investor that was pretty new. And, we were playing super hardball on them. And we were saying, for weeks, we didn't respond to the emails and stuff. We saw that we were desperate. We didn't respond. And then at one point we were like, okay, let's meet up. But, you're going to have to basically come with your entire partnership. And you're going to have to tell us 2 hours after the meeting whether you're in or out, right? So we put a lot of pressure and played like super self-confident. And then we were
kid tendencies
in this cafe, like, and both of us like really were scared to death, my co-founder and me, and we were just looking at each other, and we're like, life, we had 100 employees, a week of cash left, and we're like, life sucks. Yeah. And then we were like, all right, let's just pretend we're the most self-confident people on the fucking planet. Yeah. And so we walked into this office and we're like, we pitched the hell out of them. And then I walked down, I was like, board meeting is at 11 a.m. I need a call from you, whether you're in or out. Bye. Right? And left, right? And then there was actually a board meeting at 11 a.m. But that board meeting was
for different purposes.
Oh no, that board meeting was whether we're going to
to
wind
fold
down
the
the company, right,
yeah.
or not. And on the way to the office where we had the board meeting, I received a call, and the investor said, "We have decided that we're investing into your company. We're investing 15 million at a 30 million valuation or whatever, right?" And I was like, "All right, thanks for letting me know, but I will take this to the board and I will let you know whether we decide whether we'll go for you." And I hung up, and I just started crying so crazy. And I just moved my co-founder, we just started hugging each other, and it was really close to the edge. And then we went to the board meeting. We said, "Listen, guys, we have a lead, play it cool, like it's normal, and save the company."
Yeah, man. I mean, I mean, Lucas, do you want to give it a go? I'm sure you could. I'm sure you could find.
No. So first of all, I think it's important, when we all refer to scaling, that when you start a company in the startup ecosystem, you have to be aware that what you're doing is you're accelerating a business by external cash. So it's not literally, funded with own money, so that the growth is accelerating. So you're scaling in minute one. So, and when you scale, then you make mistakes. When you scale, you actually, I always say what some companies do in 5 years, you're doing in 1 year. So, and that doesn't go well always. So, meaning you're under constant pressure. And I think what people have to ask themselves before they start is that really something they want to do, right? Because it takes persistence, it takes conviction, and it takes actually stamina as a person.
Are you trying to escape? Are you trying to escape to answering the question?
No, I'm not. No, I just want to say that this is part of it. So, and now I have a similar topic, and again, in fundraising, I feel like the story you told, Julian, it feels like every round is like this. So I mean, I really appreciate that you said that this was your first or your second round. I think it's always kind of the same, but it's less volatile. But I had the same situation because for the first 5 years, I had to fund the business predominantly by myself, and I didn't have a lot of money. And then at a certain time, actually my first investor, and also not a lot of people know that story, my first investor was a sausage producing millionaire from Germany. I'm not going to give the name, but obviously not in the mindset of scaling a business and burning cash. So we're talking about a mid-sized company of a person who was asking me every month to get to profitability. And I was sitting there and said, like, Mr. XYZ, listen, I really like you, but we're having really a complete different understanding of what we're doing here. So I then took probably the biggest bet in my life, where I said, listen, I'm going to take a loan off you to finance the company for 6 months. And that was the due date was 31st of March 2008, when I had to pay him back. And I said, but if I pay you back, I literally flipped the company, because I was diluting all the time, and I got to, I don't know, 15% of the company. And I said, I pay you back, I give you $1 million on top, and then we flip the company to whoever signs up for this deal. So I signed this deal, and when I went to VCs, they said, like, this is the craziest, worst deal we've seen you could sign up for, because do you really think we're going to give you the money to pay back your sausage millionaire? and flip the company, right? And I was like, okay, so now I have a serious problem because I had a 500K loan and actually, had to get another $1 million on top to flip the company. So I was traveling the world and received trillions of no's. And then I remember I was back in Berlin, and I received a call from Union Square Ventures. And Union Square Ventures, who doesn't know them, is probably one of the top 10 venture capitalists globally. They were really, or are still, one of the best VCs around. And I thought it was a joke, right? But it was Fred Wilson and Brett Burnham who called me, and he said, listen, we heard from the SoundCloud guys because they just invested in them. And we were then their second investment after SoundCloud in Europe. We heard from the SoundCloud guys, your numbers are growing. And that was in January. And I really actually gave up and thought I'm going to be like personally liable for 500K, which I don't have. So, and they then said, okay, let's do this, right? So, and I've signed the contract with Union Square Ventures on 22nd of March, 2008. And my loan liability was running out 31st of March, 2008. So literally, we're talking about 9 days between complete bankruptcy, personally 500K liable, to actually getting 15 million 1.5 from Union Square Ventures in 2008, which was the biggest funding round in Berlin at that time, and definitely one of the biggest in Europe. And it's not great to be in such a situation, but when you went through this once, you get really solid when these things happen. Other people will completely go crazy, but now when these things happen, I really stay far more calm. And that's what I said in an interview a couple of years ago, and I don't mean that in the wrong way. I wish for people to go through these things early in their startup lives in order to understand really what this means moving forward, to have the conviction and the real fighting skills to get through phases like these.
And I hope you eat these sausages today with a lot of joy.
I don't, because they actually don't taste well. I mean, I guess there are a lot of people here. So, but it's called Zimbo. That's Julian, you're probably familiar. Zimbo stands for Zimmermann Bochum. So very smart way of marketing your brand. So you can buy it in every supermarket, but I would not recommend it. It's not really the best sausages you can get in Germany.
Yeah.
Not a sponsored comment, clearly.
Yeah. How much are you getting paid for?
Melvin, I'm gonna bring some when Julian and I were, when we're coming in January, we're gonna bring you some Zimbo-Wurst from Germany.
Prepare my belly.
Incredibly excited. Yeah. But yeah, I think one thing you mentioned there, which I think is an important thing to kind of hone in on, right? And like, I think all kind of later stage entrepreneurs have experienced something like that. And actually, what I'd like to put forward, and I think you mentioned this, is that like that is not limited to early stage funding. It's the only thing that changes in later stage funding is that the stakes are much bigger, right? Like you have the same situation, you just have there's a lot more people and there's a lot more zeros, and you still have the same timelines, right? And I think that's something that like to your point, Lucas, is incredibly important. Like I always refer to it as that, like, I don't know, it's like that like very mushy bit inside your chest dies. Like it basically just dies. Like you go to like a point where it is literally, it's been like blasted. Like you're just ice cold. Like no matter what happens in the day, you got like 4 hours left. You got 4 hours left, and you're just like.
I think the importance is, Louis, that when you again at the stage where our three companies are, it doesn't change, because the thing is, growth costs money, right? So, and when you want to grow, you in very few cases businesses are profitable. So you're always on the edge, and as you said, Louis, it's just a numbers game, right? But the thing what we all need to account for is with growing numbers. And, you know, Julian has 1,300 employees. I have 700. I don't know, Melvin, how many you have, but you know, it's people. And when you deal with people, you have to deal with them in a respectful way. And it's a responsibility not only for the ones you have in the team, because most of them have families and kids. So, and that's something, you know, where you cannot go crazy like the FTX guys did, right? I mean, that's like insane. I mean, I'm speechless, like, because that's fraud, and how you can misuse, you know, your power to do these things. I mean, go to the edge, but never overstep the red line in terms of, you know, fraud because it's not worth it, right? And this guy, I mean, what has he got from it? Nothing. He will probably go to prison, and he, you know, freaked out a complete industry, and not only the industry, far more. And these things, there's the limit to, you know, what you can and what you should do. And the importance is really that no one should forget that there are, whatever, it's 20, 100, 500,000 people. It's always people working at your business, where you have to treat them with respect, because they are the ones building what you're actually trying to accomplish as a CEO and founder.
Yeah, no, I mean, super fair point, right? And I think that kind of brings into kind of light, I think, one of the other key things about scaling, right? I mean, the responsibility grows, and your responsibility to manage that. I mean, I can't tell you I felt differently when we were 10 people to now. Like, you feel the same, but it's kind of the same kind. It's actually, yeah, I mean, it's the same, right? But one of the things I've always been kind of fascinated by, particularly in the class of high growth ventures that we're talking about here, and I know Julian is kind of one of the most well-known fundraisers in general, but you're basically signing up to raise funding to grow at a rate that is faster than pretty much anyone else, and that's how you build, in some cases, market dominance, right? So I mean, like you have to sign up for this, right? And you take that responsibility on. And I mean, like Julian has some interesting kind of, over the years, you've told me some interesting ways of guiding how much you're raising from a growth perspective. Like, how do you bring that into this kind of convo, Julian?
Yeah, so I mean, after like a, let's say, tough start, right? I said, okay, I never want to get this company into a similar situation ever again. And I developed this this method, right? And the method was really liberating. And this method was, what was the largest investment round in your industry at the stage, and take that ×2, right? And that's your goal. The largest Series A of all times was 15 million. So I said, okay, we're going to raise 30. And in the end, we did. The largest Series B of all times was 120 million. And we raised 240 million. The largest Series C of all times was 250 million. We actually raised 650 million. And I'm going to explain to you why this works. So instead of going around and saying, okay, how could a incremental improvement of every part of the business look like, and where could we involve, I take an outside-in perspective. And I say, what would you do if you had this amount of capital available? So 240 million, for example. And the amount of ideas that come from your team members are tremendous. And the amount of motivation that is then created by your team thinking about what to be able to achieve if we would have achieved this target or this raise is so energizing. And what I realized is, if I set myself really high goals, if I then figure out a way on how to convince myself of our ability to deploy this capital in a really smart way to fuel the growth, and in my ability to be able to raise that capital, if I imagine myself how it feels like being in the situation once I've achieved it with all of my senses, and then work backwards and imagine how every single step played out until I have achieved this goal, then start talk about it and tell people what my plan is, and then act according to my plan, it's just tremendous, because the self-confidence you're displaying by having done the work, not just put yourself a high goal, but put yourself a high goal and eliminate the doubt at the same time, and do the work in terms of imagining how it feels like to really manifest that target. The reaction of people listening to you when you say, I'm going to raise 240 million, is just unbelievably different to if you don't do the work, right? And it has worked every time.
And you know, Julian, there's one sentence, what I refer to in this case is projects fail because they're thought too small, right? Because if you don't go in and want it all, and people don't feel that, you won't achieve it. If you think you can get here, you will never get here. So, and it's the same thing with fundraising. It's actually a psychological event, right? Because in most cases, people think that VCs really do due diligence, but in the end they do, but it's the FOMO part, the scarcity, yeah? If you say, listen, I'm on this journey, you know, join me or not, I don't care. I mean, I give you a slot, but you know, this is where I'm going. And then when you tell them you're almost done with fundraising, then they invest, right? When you have a lead. So, and the bigger you think and the bigger you go, the more you will achieve. And
well, investors invest if they believe in you, right? If they believe in you, I always say they have to almost fall in love with you. They have to build like a real emotional connection to you. And then if you are the guy that knows with every part of the body that your company is going to be $100 billion business, right? And you spread that energy, and then you go out and say, my valuation is 5 billion. They think it's a 95% discount. I would be stupid if I wouldn't invest.
Yes. Yes.
Exactly that.
Yeah, and I think just interpreting that for the earlier stages as well is something I hear a lot, is like, you know, startups basically going to VCs and getting through DD and getting no's, right? Like one of the things like that DD does is find you a bunch of reasons why to say no, right? Like that's what it does. Like you never go into DD to find reasons to say yes. That doesn't happen that
But Louis,
way.
you know that's why I sometimes start when I have first conversations with VCs, I say, listen, if you want the list of things why you should not invest, I can send it to you upfront and we can just stop this conversation, right? Because if you want to find a reason, you will find hundreds, because it's a startup and not an established 100 billion company with profits, right? I mean, there is a reason why it's called a startup and why it is actually in a growth phase where you do thousands of mistakes and you try thousands of things which don't work. So give them to them upfront and say, here are the things you can look at and you can take as a no. And if that's the case, we can just shorten the process and don't have to go on due diligence.
Yeah, I mean, I'm intrigued. Like Melvin, you've actually had like a super illustrious but like semi-undercover angel investing like life over the last 5 years. Like, how do you see this from the investor side? Like, do you kind of buy into the reason why? And then have you ever done a DD? Is this like part of your...
I'm like wondering now, like, am I asking too many questions when I should be asking for that list, Lucas? Please share that list next time so I know what bullet points to ask for when to say no. I think it's interesting, right? Being on the other side, I found and so look, our first round was 10,000K from Oxford University. I mean, we literally just snuck them in for that, and it was a very hard one to get, but there wasn't much DD done then. But I think as African, I've struggled a fair bit actually, even like having teams in the US and stuff. They're just like this African boy is in the city. What does he know about the US? But I think for me, it's always been, how do I be the angel investor that I wish I had? And so I think one, it's about being clear with being frank. If it's a no, it's a no. Don't drag someone on because they'll be holding some space or a seat, as Lucas will say, waiting for you. So rather be direct with someone and also have empathy. But I think in the same vein, what I find in that process is one, I think comes down to the point I mentioned earlier around ambition. Because as a venture investor, you want to have outsized returns. If you aren't going to build a business that's going to 100x where I'm coming in at, and you don't see that vision for yourself, I can't see it as an investor. And so I think it's also one size, even size of the market, just size of ambition. And then the question, I think to Julian's point then is like, are you the right person to get that journey going? And yes, you may not be there for your series D and E and C, but are you the person to take us to that next inflection point in the business? And I think that's what I often find with entrepreneurs. I'm saying like, look, why are you solving this problem? Because as you've heard from the stories, any problem you solve is a very tough, whether you're a successful business or not. And so why you and why that particular problem? And I think once I get a sense of that, I have a greater comfort of investing. But I've often found that the best entrepreneurs I've invested in are those that have a clear sense of why they're doing and what they're going to do.
By the way, Louis, I like the question from someone where, do we lie about numbers? 100% don't lie about them. But one advice I can give you, there are good ways of interpreting numbers, right? So when you look at correlations or when you look at, numbers you can show traction, use those. But obviously, if people or if a VC or whoever comes and asks questions where you don't have great numbers, you have to show them, right? But you can show them in the way that you're learning from them, and don't show them as a failure, show them as a learning curve of, and immediately respond to what you want to change in order to get, ahead of this problem or challenge. But don't lie. Because there's something called reps and warranties where you're giving guarantees, and then when you lie in a due diligence and someone invests, you're personally liable, and that's not a nice thing to be liable for a lie. So I would not recommend to lie in these situations.
Yeah, it's not a vibe, right? It will always come out. Melvin, like there's a question for you which I think is interesting, which
hope it's not the liable one.
Yeah, the lie. No.
There's a question about like VCs often ask one question, which is about kind of like why you and why now? Like, what's the best answer you've heard there?
Yeah, and so something I believe is someone who understands the problem better than anybody else can build a solution better than anybody else. And so my background was edtech, but I made investments in fintech and further spaces. I was investing in an edtech entrepreneur, I'm actually an African entrepreneur, and he had built one of the largest tutoring businesses in Africa. And the thing he saw, the insight was this, as in like why him versus why now, and why now was most people when they do tutoring businesses, they focus on knowledge. So knowing that 1 + 1 = 2. The same way all of us know that, when Lucas and Julian come visit us in December, for us to have a 6-pack, we must gym and not eat fat foods. But the reality is that knowledge and having a 6-pack are two different things.
I'll bring a 6-pack of beer, Melvin.
And so the biggest thing when it comes to learning and knowledge is not only the knowledge, but also the habits that support that. And so the key insight that I found with this particular entrepreneur was he'd built a business in the space. He spent time understanding the problem. And he knew that the key insight everyone was missing was there's no focus on study habits, particularly in K-12. And the reason why that's relevant now is because technology is available, and also even in terms of parents being comfortable with their kids being able to have coaches and tutors and so forth. Essentially what he did was, he's a guy based in South Africa whose most of the revenue comes from America, where he's really focused on offering a study skills and habits program where he coaches kids in the US 50 minutes a day to be better at the academics. And so he's solving the own problem that he had running his tutoring company. And so for me, that was particularly important because one, it was him because he knew the problem and he had 2 kids. And 2, why now? Because parents are more open to that level of conversation, particularly post-COVID, when you found that most schools went virtual. And he's growing at knots, but that's a separate point.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think we kind of can start taking a few questions. I mean, I think there's a few good ones. I think There's one, I think, from, well, I guess it's anonymous when I look at it now, but it's around that kind of persistence and conviction that you need when it really counts, right? And this is something that I personally believe is one of the only things that I look for in a founder. Like when something is incredibly
Yes.
tough, what is the response? Because it will get I don't know how to explain it. It will get like unreal levels of difficulty. Like, and there's just, I mean, I'd recommend everyone read a book called The Hard Thing About Hard Things, but it basically tries to capture what happens in this kind of lunacy of trying to get through these stories, right? And I think that, like, how do you, I mean, kind of the question is more like, how do you develop those skills, right? Like, how did you grow these? Does anyone want to take a stab at that?
Well, I mean, I want to say that the only reason for why a company fails is because the founder gives up.
Yep, 100%.
Because there's always a solution. There's always a solution, no matter how, dire the situation looks. So it's about this resilience, and I guess how do you learn it? You learn it by exposing yourself to these type of situations, and just pulling through, right? And having failure not as an option on the plate. It's just not an option. And I've seen situations with my own company where 9,999 out of 10,000 people would have said it's over. I've seen it with companies, around me. And if the founder believes it's possible, the founder can make it work. If the founder believes it's not possible, it will fail, right?
100%.
I can only resonate with that, and the thing is, you can't learn resilience, and you can't learn persistence. That's something what I mentioned earlier. I think you partially have to have, right? So you can learn to grow it, but you cannot have it from the beginning. So and that's what you really have to see in people from the very beginning, because when you look at a company in a seed round, forget about that what you see in this pitch deck is going to be the same in 2 years. It's going to be probably different model, different people, different revenue streams, etc. pp. But that's the resilience of a person to lead a team through this stormy weather or good weather, and say, okay, let's find a way forward until we get to the next levels. And I fully agree, Julian, that if you lose faith as a CEO and founder of a company, you're done, right? So because then you have to recognize yourself, you don't see actually a way out. And I've 100% agree also, there's always a solution, always.
And VCs have one really
tough, but always.
VCs have one real strength, which is spotting lack of confidence. It's like a shark, right? If they smell blood, they're all over it. That's their strength, and if you have a lack of confidence, you will not get capital. VCs spot that instantly.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, especially the general VCs, right? They're not designed to know exactly what will happen in what you're presenting, because even you don't really know at the end of the day. Like, they can't fully know. Like the specialist VCs, maybe they've seen bunch of businesses, but the wild card is always the team. Like, can you get it done? Someone always gets it done, right? And that's coming down to this point. Like, you do get, like, I've seen, I think over the last 2-3 years, just in various ventures, I think even kind of like interacting with you, Julian, like the cases that literally on the last day seem like they are completely done. And I think that's also kind of why I think from this webinar, like, title, right? Like a lot of people that would go and Google how to scale and things like that, to be honest, I think it's only like 1/10 of the answer. Like all of the answers around how do you market and all those things are important. Like you got to get them right, but they don't make or break. They do make or break it in a bit, but they're not the ones. Like you can have the best 3/4 of the business, right? But at the end of the day, it's like when the pressure reaches that level, like what do you do? Like, do you get it over the line? Do you come out with some reason why it's not possible? Do you not even get that far? Like, and obviously there's a compounding when you get to that size, like you're too far, like there's just no way back, right? And I think that is actually really one of the best kept secrets of scaling, because all the stories you hear of scaling is how you got like a great market view, or like you built the tools for the right person in the market, like Julian was saying. But there were probably 20 other, 30 other businesses that were doing a similar thing at the same time, right? And they didn't get there. They didn't make it. They made it, maybe they didn't make it. Like Julian, you had a story of someone who was building a insurtech at the same time that like inspired you to build WeFox. Like they're not around, like at the end of the day. So it comes down to that.
I think the one of the risks is you know, that, and again fully agree to what you said, is there's a saying in German that you know, craziness and being crazy or being a genius is very close to each other, right? So and you have to be careful in these situations not to over, you know, pace and to think you can walk on water, so that you have literally the balance of this is going to work out, but that you don't become ignorant, or that you don't look back and that you don't try to look at all the mistakes. So it is always about this balance of, you know, let's do something crazy and let's build something really, you know, what people don't believe is possible, but at the same time, be realistic, right? It sounds crazy, but you need to keep this balance in order not to, you know, lose your feet from the ground and not really look at the things which can hurt and harm your company moving forward.
No, fair point. Cool. So I think we're getting to the end, and I think as a semi-closing kind of question to like all of the panelists, right? I mean, we've heard about the times that you've put, like, you know, I guess the metal and getting that done, right? And like being there when you need to, and balancing kind of the ambition and the confidence with kind of, I guess the measured approach, right? But I mean, what are the, like, I guess the advice points are probably like a bit of a simplification, but there is a lot of actual stuff you're doing along this journey, like marketing, that kind of stuff, right? Like what are the main mistakes that you'd say were probably the easiest to avoid? I mean, this stuff is, you got to put yourself out there, we've established, right? You got to get out there, you got to put yourself in this situation. There's no other way. But if you could have avoided a few easy mistakes, like what would it have been as an actual takeaway? Because this stuff you basically just learn. The stuff we were talking about, you learn by going out there, right? Like, what are the easy ones?
I wanna throw in one, which is, so we have consciously we have access to 2/8 of the information within us, subconsciously 6/8. So and this is where the gut feeling comes in. And with hiring, for example, I have made tremendous mistakes that have slowed down our company and have cost our company a lot of money. And when I think about every one of these major mistakes that I've done, and think about my interactions with the candidate, I do remember the time where I had a bad gut feeling, where something was off. And then I tried to convince myself that the CV checks all boxes and I'm getting good feedback from my peers. But every time I had this bad gut feeling, it turned out to be a horrible mistake. So one of my big advice is to trust your gut, especially when it comes to hiring.
Yeah, man. Strong. Melvin?
Can't agree more.
Yeah,
I always
think
the gut feeling is the sum of experiences. So when you know, and you just have to listen. Melvin, over to you.
it's like when you fall in love, guys, like you said, if you know, you know. And so would definitely agree with that. I think the other thing I would add as one, I think not acting quick enough to feedback. I think, and that goes both in terms of firing someone, but also changing strategy. I think, you know, all of us, to I think Julian's point, all of us think we're fairly smart. And I think not being able to see the data for what it is and being able to have a clear point of failure. And so something which I would say is, as you're scaling out, have success criteria so you know when you're failing and we need to switch up your motion, because it's okay to grow, but if you're growing at 5% month on month, okay, that's not that exciting. If you could be growing at, let's say, 30%. And so from that perspective, just being very diligent about when to change people or strategy.
Yeah, man, spot on. Yeah, I mean, thanks. Yeah, I mean, I think we've managed to get too close to the end for me to ask Julian and Lucas about the techniques they use to settle governance issues, which we chatted about in the warm up. We'll have to leave those incredibly useful and very scientific techniques to maybe a follow-on podcast. But yeah, thanks guys. Really appreciate you guys taking the time. I mean, like I know Julian and Lucas are traveling on fundraising, if nothing else. But yeah, thanks for taking the time. I know your time is super valuable, and I think everyone did learn a lot of that. And yeah, I mean, and also thanks to our team for putting together kind of this entire thing. I think Sammy spent a lot of stressful time trying to get responses out of these three chaps. Only like 1 hour before, only 1 hour before being like, oh yeah, it's totally on. Like what? Anyway, yeah. And I mean, I guess lastly from my side, I think a lot of you, I think know a bit about Delta, but if you'd like to get kind of involved with us anyway, we do kind of three main things. One is we incubate ventures through our day zero investor called Zero, innovative name. So if you're thinking of founding a venture, check this out on our website. The second thing is we accelerate ventures through our services-based value propositions, effectively designed just to help ventures. So we have a strong network and 300 venture builders. So check out our site on there. And we also invest in ventures with our upcoming fund. So stay tuned on that. And also just a strong network of angels and VCs. Yeah. So get in touch with me on LinkedIn. And yeah, hopefully in a few years we can have a revision of this exact panel, and we'll see if our views are still the same. And then I will promise to tell you what Julian said actually about how to truly settle governance decisions with co-founders, because I think that's actually the real secret. Actually, like the stuff you said. The stuff you said now is marginally useful. That actually is the only way that I can think. So if you ever meet Julian, I think ask him what it was. And I think, yeah, I mean, I think there's definitely one of these versions coming for Lucas and Julian at the next meeting. So
100%.
100%.
Full commitment.
Full commitment. Yeah.
I'm ready.
Anyway,
I'm ready.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Louis, for setting this up. Thanks, Melvin.
No problem.
Bye,
Thanks,
Julian.
guys.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.